I'm Rob Dietz.
I'm Jason Bradford.
And I'm Asher Miller. Welcome to Crazy Town, where shooting lasers at the moon reminds us of a simpler time.
Hi, this is producer Melody Allison. Thanks for joining us in Crazy Town, where Jason, Rob, and Asher tackle crazy-making topics like climate change, overshoot, runaway capitalism, and why we're all deluding ourselves. Here's a quick warning. Sometimes this podcast uses swear words.
Language!
Now, on to the show.
Okay, guys, before we get to the conversation we're going to have today, can we just do a little nostalgia tour? Would that be okay with you?
That's all I want to think about.
I want to take you back to the 80s.
Yes.
It's my decade.
To late 80s. Back in the days where I had a real long mullet.
You were beautiful, I'm sure.
It was a mane of hair. It was incredible.
It's still amazing.
But, bangs up top.
Yeah, did you wear leg warmers and a jean jacket?
Yeah. Yes, I did. I would watch Victoria Principal jazzercise videos all the time.
Who did the Maniac video?
Oh, I don't remember.
Anyway.
Any case, but I'm glad you're bringing up music. This is what I wanted to get to, because I was prepping the other day for an event that we're going to be doing on April 1st.
Oh, I thought you were getting your beans and grains together or something like that.
No. Not that kind of prepping. Okay. Prepping for this event. So I'm going to be hosting a conversation with Vanessa Andriotti and Dougald Hind. We're going to be talking about navigating the end of modernity, right? And I was reflecting on that word, modernity. And for some reason, you know what came to my mind? You won't be able to get this.
No one can get inside your mind other than you. You're just going to have to reveal it.
The album Quadrophenia. Do you guys know that album?
Yeah, The Who.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know it super well, but I recognize tons of songs, I'm sure, right away.
But just time out for a sec. You said you were going back to the 80s. I'm pretty sure that was pre-80s.
No, I'm talking about me listening to it.
Uh-huh. Okay.
I've got through phases with music, right? So I had my little Who phase, and The Who, like some other bands, like to do these rock operas. So Quadrophenia was basically a rock opera. The whole album was like one story. In fact, they made it into a movie later. Quadrophenia was basically about these guys, these teenagers, and they were part of this group called the Mods, like Mod for Modern. And they like to dress up in these fancy suits. They called them zoot suits, and they would ride around on Vespas. For some reason, I don't know, that album came to mind, so I had to go down memory lane and listen to it, which is a lot of fun. But it made me think of something I want to ask you guys, which is albums. I used to listen to albums. I would get these albums. I would buy them. I would save up my money. I would go buy these albums. And opening up the album, reading the liner notes, sitting there listening to it, repeatedly listening to albums over and over and over again. My boys, the way they listen to music is, I don't even know if I'm sure they've listened to an album all the way through, but they don't experience music as an album, right? They just experience it as a sort of instantaneous thing on their phone, So it made me think of elements of modernity that have actually already left us, right? They're extinct already. And I know vinyl's not totally extinct.
It's coming back.
But that experience feels like it's largely extinct, So curious what you guys, what piece of modernity of your previous life that's now gone would you say you miss?
That's a really interesting question. It's like modernity, technology is evolving so fast that some of it's just already gone, even though you would still classify it as being a modern thing.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to stick on the music scene for a little bit. Not specifically the music, but the way that you tune your radio. So do you guys remember how car stereos used to have these mechanical buttons? And you would actually chunk it in. You would push it in, and the little dial would move to your presets. I just love that.
That was fancy.
I love that tactile mechanical feel of some old stuff. And in fact, I have this problem, right? Those sinks that you put your hands in and they're like motion sensors, or somehow they know your hand is there. They don't recognize me. I don't know. I don't think I put off an electrical field.
Never. Oh, I know what you're talking about for washing your hands.
Yeah.
Another example would be all these push button things like a microwave or a stove.
Wait,
you have
those
to
don't
push.
work for you either? They don't recognize you?
A lot of times they don't. So I'm just like, can I just get an old mechanical dial? They worked so well.
This is why you use an easy bake oven, isn't it?
Yeah. I just eat everything raw. There's no point in trying to cook.
There you go. What about you, Jason?
Well, okay. Now, since we're on food, on Easy Bake, Chuck E. Cheese Pizza Time Theaters. Do you remember those places?
Yeah.
Now, there was one not far from my house in Cupertino, California, that they experimented with this Chuck E. Cheese, a different business model, and it was the best because you paid one fee to get in, and all the video games were just open, and all the pizza was just laid out for you. So you show up with like your $10 or whatever.
You're there all day.
And you could have unlimited games, unlimited pizza, and unlimited animatronic shows.
Unlimited brain rot when you're leaving.
As an 11-year-old, do you have any idea how great that was?
So that was your version of TikTok, basically. Just unlimited.
Probably.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Just go there for hours.
Interesting. Well, thank you for going down memory lane.
Unlimited sodas, too.
Of course I had sodas. Okay, well, thanks for going down memory lane with me. But I want to have actually a more serious conversation about modernity, if we can. And I thought we should bring in somebody who's been thinking about this a lot more than I have, I would say. And that's our good friend, Tom Murphy. So what do you guys think about us seeing if Tom would join us?
Yeah, we're going to bring him in. And I'm going to introduce Tom because he is our favorite astrophysicist.
How many astrophysicists do you know?
Everybody needs a favorite astrophysicist. Tom's a professor emeritus from the University of California, San Diego. I don't know that I can get this right, but he used to test general relativity by bouncing laser pulses off of these mirrors that were left on the moon by Apollo astronauts.
All these things are lies. I mean, there's so many of the things you just said didn't actually happen. Right. But okay, I'll pretend. And
I genuinely love hanging around Tom as a friend. Asher, you and I got to spend some time at his house, and Tom took us out kayaking.
Yeah, that was fun. Yeah.
And I think I was even paddling a kayak that Tom had built, which is incredible.
Yeah, and you didn't drown or anything. It was amazing.
I don't know, Asher, you were probably doing some work, but Tom took me back to his workshop and showed me the project that he kind of does in his spare time, where he's the co-inventor of this aircraft detector. So the idea is that telescopes are shooting lasers into the sky, and you don't want to hit an airplane that's passing by. So
you got a hole through the airplane? What?
Yeah, just cut it right in half. And so Tom's got this thing that he made. He's like soldering parts on a computer. I don't know. I can't even use the terminology.
We should talk about this because Elon Musk's Doge will come around and just cancel that contract.
Right. But anyway, after spending time in that world, what's really interesting is Tom's turn toward the limits to growth. So anyway, let's get you in here, Tom, and find out what's what.
Sure, just send me the link and I'll show up.
Oh my gosh, he's here.
It's a miracle.
You happen to be free.
Thanks for joining us, Tom.
Sure.
So we want to throw this question that we've been asking ourselves. Extinct modernity, right? So I had Chuck E. Cheese, Pizza Time Theater, Rob and Asher. I don't even remember their stuff. It was stupid. But anything that happened in the past that's now extinct, but it's part of modernity, what's your favorite?
Well, I really liked the discussion that you had. And, at first I thought things like the space shuttle and the Concorde represented a vision of where we thought we were going.
Right.
And in fact, I put the space shuttle on the front of my textbook, and I didn't ever explicitly mention this, but in my mind is, where the hell does it think it's going? Mm-hmm. It just sort of seemed like we all knew what was happening. I miss the extinct threat of nuclear war.
I'm glad it's extinct. I didn't even know that.
It's coming back, Tom. It's coming back.
I know, but didn't we have this period where that was just no longer on the radar?
Right.
That was kind of
you
interesting.
you missed when we thought it was extinct.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I
gosh.
misinterpreted that too. I thought we got real dark there for a second.
Like, I love the duck and cover drills that we used to do.
Yeah.
I was somewhat intentionally, playing both sides there. But, the radio button discussion, still when you design a GUI, which I've done a number of times, there's one choice for radio button, because you can only select one of the boxes at a time. And that still harkens back to that mechanical, push this thing and the dial actually zips to where you want it to go. And that reminded me of, dialing is a thing that we still talk about on the phone, but there's no dial anymore, which is great because, if you had a number with a lot of 8s and 9s in it, you were waiting forever.
It was terrible.
Yeah, your friends never called you.
Think about the delayed gratification when you were making a 1-800 call to order whatever the album share that you were buying off the TV.
From
you had
Time
to,
Life.
You had to dial 1-800. You had to really want that album.
Zeros are the worst. And how many of our youth know that zeros were terrible?
Exactly.
So,
true.
An area code like 212, whoa, that was a special.
Yes.
So anyway, but it reminded me of observatories because I cut my teeth in a sense at Palomar Observatory on the 200-inch telescope, which is just a marvelous machine. It's really a piece of art. It's crafted. It's lovingly made. It was made during the Depression years, and things slowed down a lot. But that meant that they took their time. Well, and they just did things differently in any case. And then you go to a telescope like the Keck telescope, which I also worked at in Hawaii, which is a modern 10-meter telescope. And it just seems rickety. The the stairs that you're walking on, the handrail doesn't feel very substantial. It's all just sort of cutting corners. But the thing that reminded me of Palomar was the radio button, because Palomar had this great thing called the Phantom. The Phantom was this mechanical analog to the telescope that was, recognizably telescope shaped, and it sat in a little sort of cabinet, and it mimicked the actions of the telescope. So it moved as the telescope did, just mechanically through whatever moved the telescope moved the Phantom. But the reason they had the Phantom was they needed to know where to point the dome. And the dome was basically, the Phantom had 2 wires on either side of it. And if it touched one wire, it would say, oh, we need to move the dome this way to keep it aligned. Right. So it was a very mechanical, ingenious solution. And, since then they've replaced it with barcode scanners. So, they have barcodes all around the periphery and a little scanner. So they always know where it is. And I don't know what the price accumulates to during a night as it beeps and, adds up the items. But I really missed that age when you had this really clever mechanical approach, and now it's replaced with more computerized things that can fail. And when they fail, it's hard. Like cars also. I miss the car that I grew up starting when I was 16 and started to drive was a Chevy, 1974 Chevy pickup truck with a 6-cylinder inline engine. And I am not exaggerating when I say that you could stand in the engine compartment with your feet on the ground next to the engine on either side because you had that much room.
Right.
And now you look at a car and there are about 12 things in between you and the pavement. If you shot a laser, you would hit 12 things no matter where you go. It's just so completely packed. There's no standing in it. And there was just a simplicity. You could point to everything and say, that's what this does. That's what this does. And now and you could fix it. Now when something breaks, it's kind of irreparable.
Planned obsolescence.
Yes. All in the name of efficiency.
Well, so Tom, I wanted to invite you into a conversation with us before we actually do this event that we're going to be hosting with Vanessa and Dougal, because I know you've been on a bit of a journey around modernity, and it's been interesting as someone who's been so steeped in it, I would say, to see you go through that journey a little bit. But Before we get to that, maybe I'd be curious how you define modernity. Like if somebody asks you, because I would think for a lot of people, they don't even know what we mean when we question it.
Yeah, at some level, I kind of like the ambiguity of the term because it doesn't have baggage yet associated with it. And so people are more willing to entertain the idea that modernity has a time limit and that it's temporary. And there are a lot of things about modern life that people don't like and wouldn't mind seeing going. So if you say civilization, people have a much greater attachment to that word because it feels like the opposite is barbarism and violence. And so, and that's a false kind of dichotomy. But the point is modernity doesn't have that kind of emotional attachment. And so it can mean many things. It's obviously how we live today. It's our culture. It's fossil fuels. It's high energy. It's high material use, it's science, it's technology, and these things have been with us for, centuries, but not millennia. But I would actually, in my mind, I extend modernity to, there are different ways to think of it, but it's also an attitude, it's an approach, it's a culture. And it's a culture of believing in mastery, of we are the pinnacle species, the evolutionary endpoint, if you will. And this is all kind of a mythology, a cultural mythology. And I borrow heavily from Daniel Quinn's Ishmael here, where our mythology is that the world belongs to us. And, we were made to rule it and conquer it and master it. And once you have that attitude, which is pretty old,
that's older than modernity.
Thousands of years.
Yeah, that's older than modernity.
That is the central shift that paved the way for modernity because we just got better and better at enacting that attitude. But the attitude is thousands of years old, not millions like humans or hundreds of thousands like Homo sapiens. And so it's relatively new, and on certainly ecological evolutionary timescales, it's a flash. Even 10,000 years is a flash. So the agricultural revolution was one of conquering. It was one of control. It was deciding what should live and what should die, plants and animals. And it's all for us. It belongs to us. Fences, animal enslavement, all kinds of things came with it. And then we just got better and better at it and perfected the art of control. And science really helped that. Technology really helped that. Fossil fuels really accelerated it. So, but I don't see those elements as major turning points. The turning point was, I think, a much earlier one that really set the stage for modernity. And we've been that recognizable culture ever since. We don't identify culturally with, say, hunter-gatherers, but we sure identify with a Mesopotamian, We understand what they were after and how they approached the world. So that to me is the big definer of modernity. Is it's our attitude of how we comport ourselves on this planet.
So, Tom, I don't want to ascribe some attribute to you, but you're talking about how we enacted this attitude of mastery and this art of control. But you were kind of ensconced in an arena that was really playing out that story, right? I mean, you're in an astrophysics department. You're doing things that are, super, super high tech. I mean, honestly, I find myself impressed, right? I'm like, wow, you built this thing, how do you know how to do that? I remember asking you that in your workshop, and you just talked about tinkering a lot with things as a kid and just being really interested in it. Being steeped in a place like that in the university system and kind of being in that culture in a big way, how did you get out of that? What's the journey to saying the kinds of things that you just said, where you're recognizing this human supremacy and this culture that maybe won't work, that one does not logically follow the other. So I'm curious, how did you get there?
I mean, I was definitely fully invested. I mean, I was all in as a member of Modernity, doing exactly what you would hope a member of Modernity would do, shooting lasers at the moon. That's everybody's dream, right? So I think the way I see the journey is that I was always interested in understanding the path that we're on and trying to imagine where things are going. I grew up with Star Trek and The Next Generation as a teenager and really loved it. And I think, I never liked the original Star Trek because it just seemed too campy and nerdy. And I was not a real nerd kid. I only learned to do that later. But I really liked Spock because my family was so illogical. I was a beacon of logic. And so I really aspired to have that mental discipline and so forth. And so I think that was really influential. And I really loved the sort of fantasy world of, the Prime Directive and all this, enlightened future that we could embrace. And, this was our path. And I was not questioning that really. It was exciting. The space shuttle was exciting. Here's, our path into the stars and so forth. So, but, as a kid, and now I associate those ideas with juvenile fantasy, right? And so, and it's almost surprising to me to see other people who have become adults and are still, still there.
Including the richest among us.
Absolutely. I mean, the biggest blind spot you can imagine. So I think I was always interested in the future. And so I knew that energy was an important part of how we get things done. As a physicist, I clearly understood energy and sort of physics owns energy to some extent. And so I was interested in teaching a course my first year at UC San Diego on energy and the environment. It's a general education course for non-science majors. And I thought, I'll pick this one. I had a menu of what courses would you like to teach. And so nobody had claimed that one. And then I thought I would learn a lot. And I did. I already knew that solar was so abundant that it's almost a no-brainer that, of course, we just switch to solar when fossil fuels go away, and it helps the CO2 problem and everything. So, done, right?
Yeah. A
simple premise and a simplistic, stripped down, decontextualized world has very simple solutions. And so it just seemed pretty obvious. But the more I looked into it, the more I realized it's hard. And I did my own solar setup. And I started small with one panel and a battery and a charge controller. And then I said, what about this other kind of panel and this other kind of battery and this other kind of charge controller? And let me just sort of get a feel for this. And I put my television on it at first. And then I got another panel and another battery and put the living room lights on it. And so, and then I thought, what would be really cool is to run my refrigerator off of this. So more panels and more battery and it basically was an off-grid system. And I was in a condo at the time and, had the landlord's permission to put a hole through the wall for an extension cord. And so it was just really kind of crude, but I learned so much and the energy became very personal because I worked so hard to get it. And so watching TV, and I learned this was back in, we had a cathode ray tube, and it turns out that the darker the movie, the less energy it takes because you're lighting up the electron beam less. And it's not true now with, LCD TVs where you have a backlight that's just full on, and then you have things to suppress the light coming through. But there's some variance on that, but still I learned so much about living with your own energy and the difficulties of off-grid storage, intermittent power supplies. What do storms mean? What do, periods of bad weather mean? But my approach was, let's technology our way out of this. We're smart and clever people, and this is what we do. But the more I looked into it, the more I realized how much of a kind of house of cards this whole business was and how there were some glaring weak spots. Growth itself is just a non-starter for a long-term success. But even at steady state, you can't maintain a steady state at billions of humans living a modern lifestyle. It's just a temporary stunt. So yeah, the more I realized, and it's sort of closing exits one after the other, where I just always assumed that we would figure it out. And now I've gotten to the point where I realize how naive that vision is, because, we construct mental models in our brains that our brains are limited, by the way. I mean, they're organs. They're evolved to do certain things, and they do certain things pretty well, and they give us flexibility, but they're limited. They have, only so much capacity. And something like an evolved ecology is so complicated, and so many interconnections and dependencies and relationships that we barely scratch the surface of understanding. Our brains are just incapable of the kind of wisdom that an ecology expresses, that's formed over deep time, and we're just simply incapable. And I think of it kind of like the ravenous bug bladder beast from Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide. That's so stupid that to evade it, all you have to do is cover your eyes, because it figures if you can't see it, it can't see you.
Right.
But we're almost as bad as that, because if an ecology can't see its way into our brain, we assume it doesn't exist. And there are a lot of things that don't fit into our brains, into our mental models. Most things don't. And so we have this bias toward our models, toward the map and not the territory, so that we assume if it doesn't fit in our brain, it might as well not exist. And you'll see this all the time with "I don't see why not" is a common response to why we won't go to Mars, or why we won't keep modernity going forever. I don't see why not. And it's like, yes, that's precisely the problem, but thanks for admitting it. That's very big of you, and an important step to realize that you don't see why not. And that's okay. We're not expected to see everything.
I think you're right that is actually progress for somebody to say, I don't see why not, because a lot of what we see, we had a conversation not too long ago talking about this series of articles that the New York Times published on the future of the food system. And one of the things we talked about was that you start from these assumptions of how things must be, and then you try to figure out how those assumptions are going to get fulfilled. Right? So the assumption is people are going to continue to want to live in the desert. We're going to still need to consume the food the way that we do. It's like, of course, more people in the future are going to be consuming more energy. Like that's just an obvious. And so we just have to figure out how to solve that problem, versus questioning whether or not that assumption is even true in the first place.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the world doesn't bend itself to our will, which is why we've thought we had to conquer, when the pests come in to eat our row crops, we have to, how dare they? That's ours. We have to do something about it. And so the universe is really not on board with just making sure that our schemes work. And, it's going to fight back.
One of the things that I have trouble with continually is knowing all this and then still living in modernity and wondering, is there a way where I can start practicing or trialing post-modernity ways of life? And it becomes really hard to do. I often joke that I'm sorry I didn't grow up as a Romanian peasant, because I was spending time at Chuck E. Cheese Pizza Time Theater instead of, learning how to do all the things that someone as a kid would just normally get up and do. And so when you see people from these other cultures, and now I know Rob has a fan, he's like watches some of these YouTubes of these people that like know how to live out in nature and have these incredible skill sets. And what do? I teach tennis. Like I teach kids how to hit a fuzzy yellow ball with a graphene racket and poly strings on a concrete court with painted lines. I love doing it. It's a lot of fun. But I almost wish could these parents pay me to teach their kids to do something else? And but it's just not part of our culture, right? It's like it's easy money to teach people how to play tennis. But if you say, I'm going to try to teach us and learn how to live without all the trappings of modernity. It's just like, good luck. That's not not much of a viable business, I don't think. Or maybe it is. Maybe I should try that, but I don't think I get very much interest, honestly. So what do you do? What do you do? Like, as somebody who grew up on all this, knows the BS, but you don't have the skill set, and the vast majority of people around you aren't even interested.
Yeah, I think I look at the longer game here because I don't think I am personally going to exit modernity. Mm-hmm. I mean,
yeah,
I'm steeped in it. It's all I know. I don't have the skill sets, or most importantly, the community, because it's not an individualistic approach. We're not the rugged individuals we pretend to be. We're a species that's contextualized to group survival, and working cooperatively within that fairly small band. So that's very unlikely to ever be my reality. And I don't stress about it too much. I don't think that by next week I have to be out. It's not going to happen. And modernity took a while to build. It's not going to necessarily take 10,000 years that it took to get to this point to unwind, but it can take generations. Mm-hmm. And it will take generations. I mean, some things will go away fast, and then some things will, cling for maybe centuries, recognizable elements of modernity. And each child that's born into the conditions that exist at that time will just accept those conditions as normal and get on with life. We're very plastic and adaptable, not necessarily as individuals, but as a species, because we're just sort of almost blank slates, but with some decent instincts that are honed by evolution to work together, to be cooperative, to be observant, to be creative in how we adapt to a changing situation. And so that's, I think, going to be the story. And the people listening to this don't have to stress about not getting it right and propagating this machine. But the thing that I try to do most is just, I'm no longer in love with modernity and talk of it as an abusive partner that said nice things to me occasionally and brought me flowers, but really, at the cost of a 6 mass extinction. And so there's kind of this dark side to it that I shouldn't really embrace. And so I just don't care to propagate all of those trappings, and I can dial it down. I don't have to stop it, but I can be part of the off-ramp by just sort of not playing the game the same way, not being a consumer, not being supporting fantasies politically. So
the problem is it's hard not to be a consumer. Like, I mean, I know Cher gets pissed off every time he's like, oh God, I got to order something from Amazon. And he's just mad. He's just mad because he's like, I don't have another, what choice do I have? And I kind of feel like every once in a while, my family says, can you please go pick something up at Safeway? And I'm just like, rah! And then they know, like, I'm going to break out in hives when I walk in and see the Mylar balloons, right in the front because of whatever holiday is coming up and the stacks of soda cans. So it jars me, like you're saying. It's like, oh, do I have to go back into this abusive relationship here and just dip my toe in it continually? And that's kind of what it feels like, because I sort of see through what it took to fill this store up with, all this junk, all this cargo. And I'm mad sometimes because I feel like everybody around me is in this cargo cult, and I don't want to be there all the time. So I guess, you find your ways to sort of stay out as much as you can, is what you're saying, even though you can't help it a little bit. Because like you say, we're really a social species. And so without, like I said, if I had 50 kids that wanted to learn something besides tennis, but I don't. So what do I do, right?
Yeah, well, I know what you do. Jason. I know. You
Okay.
go look at birds.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And that's fantastic because they don't care about tennis and they don't care about what's in Safeway.
Yeah.
And if you ask them about what's going on in, Trump world right now, they don't care. And there's a wisdom there.
Yeah.
And I'm not being flippant about the word wisdom here, because a wisdom that took millions upon millions of years to establish itself as survivable, as a presence, has gotten a lot of things right. And the fact that the birds, and I see newts around my place and love them to bits, and I really take a lesson from the fact that they're just living by the laws of life.
Yeah.
So what we've done is we've created an artificial world out of our brains. And I think of modernity as a big brain fart, it's and I might be a little hesitant to use such foul language on any other podcast, but you guys,
Yeah. Thank you.
I've listened to your show. So yeah, I mean, it's just this concoction, this fabrication that's not grounded and doesn't have the same kind of wisdom. It's just sort of a look what I can do stunt, no hands. Wow, look at that. The animals and the plants don't go in for all that.
No.
And they're better for it. And so we ought to actually take something from that and realize that we can't just make it all up in our heads and expect it to work.
I sometimes wish I was a bird, because then I could just fly around and I could land in that tree and I could stick my little beak into the lichen and moss and find little bugs and make a little nest and I could, that they just know how to live in that forest or whatever, or stick their bill in the ground and pick on things. I can't even see what they're eating. I know they're finding food.
Jason, you would be one of those bower birds that is pulling mylar balloons and plastic spoons and other stuff to build your nest.
You know who does that around here are the Orioles when they make their nests. It really bums me out.
Well, they're just, they're working with what's in the environment.
Yeah.
The thing that I appreciate what you said, Tom, just about not beating yourself up for participating in modernity, but also maybe practicing some sort of detachment, I guess, a little bit. Mm-hmm. I feel batted back and forth between feeling trapped, frankly, in the reality that we currently live in, when I know to the degree that I do, the consequences of it. Like, will you end already? Like, I have this sometimes sort of this impatience, though. I don't want it to end, and certainly not end badly or quickly. Mm-hmm. I think there are moments where I deeply appreciate the benefits we've had from modernity, and like wanting to appreciate it as much as I possibly can if I recognize that it's fleeting. Like
quadrophenia.
No, like we're able to have this conversation and not be in the same room together. It would be much more lovely, frankly, to be in a room together. But I am fortunate in my work to have conversations on a weekly basis with people all around the world that I would have never gotten to meet or learn from. Mm-hmm. That's an absolute gift of modernity.
Yeah, or when you have a tooth problem, you go to a dentist, you don't have to like knock it out with a rock. That's a pretty sweet deal in modernity.
That's true. But the other thing that I really struggle with is the fact that we're actually on an acceleration path with modernity still, or at least the technological elements of modernity.
Yeah, AI stuff.
And in fact, I feel like the people, you mentioned that maybe modernity as a concept is more, it's less loaded for people as something to question than something like civilization, right? Because that feels more threatening to them. And I see that. I think people are increasingly feeling the ill effects of how modernity manifests itself in their lives now. I mean, we talked about the food system earlier. You look at just the deeply unhealthy nature of the modern food system and what it's doing to people's bodies, I think. But also communications technology, the internet, social media, these kinds of things. I think that might actually be the fact that it's accelerating so much and it's so ubiquitous and it's sort of conquered us on some level. That might be the actual thing that has people be more receptive to a message of modernity coming to an end. They may not recognize that it's going to come to an end whether we fucking like it or not. They might be more open to thinking about it ending because they're seeing that it's not benefiting them as much. I don't know.
Yeah, I do think a lot of people are aware that things aren't quite right and that things are maybe going a bit sideways and the dream is not being fulfilled. I believe that, 75 years ago, it was fairly widespread sense that we're aiming for, an ever better world. We're going to craft it. We finally have the tools to craft it the way we want, and we have the energy and the power, and it hasn't gone so well. And it's also, by the way, initiating a sixth mass extinction, which is pretty serious because a heavy primate that is high maintenance and, hungry is not going to fare well in a sixth mass extinction scenario. No. Short of that, you said that we don't like it or not, modernity is going to end. And that's absolutely true. And even just from a materials point of view, I mean, we've depleted we've taken the low hanging fruit in just a few centuries. Mm-hmm. And most of it in the last 50 years. I mean, the pace is extreme. And so you can't really keep this pace up for even 1,000 years, 10,000 years. It's just, so modernity will starve itself of metals on that time frame. And the other thing that I recognize is that, the materials that we use in modernity are not of this ecological world. We dig them out of the ground and they're not part of the circulation in the community of life. We use, in fact, 96% of our mass comes from air and water, reconstituted, reorganized. But the oxygen, the carbon, the hydrogen, the nitrogen is all from air and water. And then only 4%, a lot of calcium, phosphorus,
potassium,
are in common circulation in the community of life, but not copper, not magnesium. Well, a little tiny bit of magnesium, but titanium.
Well, we're trying to put that into our bodies as much as possible, Tom.
Exactly. Yeah, aluminum. These are weird, exotic things that we're spewing. Maybe not intentionally, maybe not, immediately, but if it comes out of the ground, it ends up in the environment, on the millennium timescale. It's just out there. And the community of life doesn't know what to do with it. And sometimes it's innocuous, but more often than not, it actually causes problems. And so not only are we going to starve ourselves of these metals if we tried to continue modernity, but it's contributing, that their use and dispersal contribute to sickness and ailing physical world, biophysical world. So we don't really have a choice to continue it. It's not a long-term viable mode of living on this planet. I think, in terms of giving it up or letting it go, a little bit of detachment goes a long way. That's something that can be a little bit contagious in the sense that we take cues from each other in our culture, and we're a social species. And so if a number of us react to this sense that things aren't going according to the dream, and that the dream was never realistic, maybe more detachment among more people will have pretty serious consequences, and we'll kind of get out in front. All the video, TikTok and whatever, is part of the phenomenon that detaches us from ourselves. And that is having consequences in terms of fertility. And so we're going to see this big demographic shift in the second half, or maybe even the first half of the century. We'll see possibly a peak of global population, and it's going to be big news. And how we react to that is going to be fascinating. I mean, some people are saying we just need to make more babies. Got
Elon Musk is on the job, man. He's trying to make as many babies as he can right now.
That's right. And JD Vance, similar. I mean, a lot of these folks are like, we need to become baby factories, but I don't think it's going to work. And so, but then some people will embrace it and say, you know what, this is actually, maybe we can make this into a good thing. And so that's kind of where I am on it.
So, Tom, I really appreciate the way you framed the idea that modernity is a temporary stunt. You know, it's like a Red Bull mountain biker coming down a cliff doing a double backflip without touching the handlebars or whatever. You know, and it's like, wow, look what we can do.
Or the show Jackass comes to mind.
Right. Well, especially when I'm talking, it does. I actually can't believe that I'm not talking about the other thing you called it, a big brain fart. That's more up my alley. But anyway, this idea of a temporary stunt and then falling out of love with temporary stunts, like, you know, eventually kind of saying, yeah, that's fine that I could do that, but did I really need to, you know, and at what cost? And so, you know, I've heard your recommendation is try to detach yourself from that. But what I'm wondering that maybe you could share with listeners is, how do you talk to other people about that? Do you just tell them about your experience and what's happened with you to kind of start what you called a contagious detachment? Like how do you, you know, let's say you're wandering around the physics department at your university and people are like, this is not on their radar whatsoever. I mean, how would somebody out there broach the topic and start to make some headway? You know, what does Jason tell his tennis students, you know, that gets them on a path towards wanting to be birds as well?
So I was reminded of and by the way, before I forget this one, you talked about, you know, being enamored of the stunt and falling out of love with the stunt, but you also prefer brain fart. So you need to fall out of love with the smell of your own brain fart. I mean, people like their own brand sometimes, but that's disgusting. So, I was reminded of the secret handshake kind of thing where I had a friend who moved to Utah. As a couple who moved to Utah, and he was describing, you know, it's Mormon country and he's not Mormon, but he was saying that when you plan some event with somebody who you barely know, you're just trying to get to know people and you're trying to find a time when you can do something. And you're like, well, Saturday I'm doing something, but what about Sunday? And you just sort of tentatively float it out there because if they're Mormon, there's absolutely not. And they're like, yeah, Sunday would work. And you're like, great, let's be friends. You know, it's like, you like cream soda? I like cream soda too. We'll be best friends. So it is kind of like that.
So we need certain like secret words or secret signals to the other modernity questioning people.
Because I would have my ears out and, you know, listen for any hints from other people. And I would drop some hints, you know, about how I think about things. And occasionally you'd run into somebody who catches the hint and then you start talking. But it's not something that I could walk up to anybody in my department and just sort of have an interesting, fruitful discussion about modernity and its temporary nature. And same among my friends. I mean, I've got a lot of really good friends who basically just don't want to talk about this stuff. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I don't push it, you know, because I want to stay friends. Right. And I had a friend that came from, you know, that I hadn't seen in 30 years, a college roommate who came and stayed with me and his wife. And, you know, it was great fun to catch up. And I might have dropped a few little hints of where I am now, but I didn't really want to burden that fun experience with, oh, by the way, here's why I think this is all going, you know, south. So I don't know. It is a bit isolating. And I think I was thinking about that, Asher, when you were talking about how you're able to connect with people internationally. But I think when you're in such a rarefied place of having this view, you kind of need that community and you need to go far and wide to find it because, you know, you can't just go to your next door neighbor and expect to connect over this kind of issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, when they complain like traffic's bad, you can't go, yeah, and civilization is collapsing. You know, it doesn't really work, does it?
Well, you can if you want to end conversations quickly, which is what I like to do sometimes, you know, because I'm an introvert and I don't like people. I think it's a good recommendation maybe for our listeners who obviously the ones who've bothered to listen to more than one episode, I think are folks who kind of are inhabiting the same sort of space as us. And maybe this is a secret handshake kind of community that they're also part of. So what I'm taking away is not riddling ourselves with guilt, not expecting ourselves to completely detach, but to maybe detach a bit emotionally or in terms of our identity to what is modernity now. And then maybe, dropping little seeds every once in a while in interactions with people that maybe some people will pick up and ask a question about it. I think even just naming things as not being permanent could be useful.
Well, and we make decisions all the time that might have some long-term ramifications. Like, the road that I live on is a private road and it's in fine shape. It was paved, probably 30 years ago, and it's okay. It's a light use road, but at some point it'll need resurfacing, and it makes sense to resurface it if modernity is just continuing for a long time. But a lot of things don't make sense anymore if it's just a temporary stunt. And that's what part of the falling out of love is about, is in the detachment, is recognizing that, wait, why am I doing this thing if our future doesn't look like what we were all told our future was going to look like? What does it really mean? And why am I doing this? And so that's a big part of it, is always asking yourself, why am I doing this in the context that this is temporary?
Yeah.
I guess a takeaway I'll throw out there is that falling out of love with modernity just opens up more space to fall more deeply in love with the complexity of the ecosystems that you inhabit.
You bet.
I try really hard to be observant of what's going on in the places that I inhabit, and observant of the things nature is doing, not observant of all the hubbub of modernity. And it's hard to do, but I think the more you can focus on that, the healthier you are, and the more in the future you'll be able to make decisions like, yeah, let's not resurface this. Let's let it return to a path and eventually to a forest or whatever it's going to be.
Right.
I appreciate you coming and sharing this with us, Tom, just a little bit about your journey and the way that you think of it. I think it's inspiring and hopeful for me to know someone who, I would say, you could have been very well excused to have stayed embedded in modernity, as, considering the work that you're doing, what you studied and all that. And for you to not only step out of it and question it, but I think in what you do at Do the Math, your blog,
which you started, by the way, you realize that, right?
Yeah, I know. We talked about that. You did it, man. It's all you.
So,
but
but that's part of the journey, and I forgot to mention it, is that you were an important part of that, is encouraging me to put these ideas out.
We've heard from a lot of people who have been following your writings, and I think it's helped them on their journey. So. Anyways, I hope that folks listening maybe want to join the conversation that we're going to have with Vanessa and Dugald, who are also been thinking very deeply about this, and just naming something that every one of us has tended to take for granted as an absolute. Just naming it is sort of the emperor's clothes thing, is an important first step. So, maybe we'll see you in person soon. We can go back out on those kayaks.
Yeah, I'd love to. You come up here, or I want to go down your way sometime soon. And
Jason will have you harvesting potatoes. Depending on
it sounds like he's going to have me working on my forehand.
Yeah, that too. We can do both. Yeah, I go back and forth
with potatoes. You could be hitting the potatoes.
Yeah, I could show you the local newt pond we have here. So. Nice. They're probably mating right now if you want to come by.
Yeah, they're actually here. They're heading to the mating zone. I see them heading north to their little mating pond.
So. All right, you guys, leave the newts alone to do their thing.
All right, thanks, guys.
All right, good seeing you, Tom.
That's our show. Thanks for listening. If you like what you heard and you want others to consider these issues, then please share Crazy Town with your friends. Hit that share button in your podcast app, or just tell them face to face. Maybe you can start some much needed conversations and do some things together to get us out of Crazy Town. Thanks again for listening and sharing.
Crazy town. Da, 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 crazy town.